Thank you, Kirsten. Let's move to Andrew Hobday, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer from Mars. He there is working for developing the approach to sustainability. He's been there for 24 years as a scientist with a background, and sounds like you've been looking at Asia Pacific, which has quite a number of growth sustainability challenges as well. So let me hand it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. Great, thank you for putting the slides up. Yes, so I've been living in Asia Pacific for the last 10 years, and it was mentioned earlier what an amazing difference has happened in that part of the world. And so when you're working for a big corporation, of course, you need to cope with the fact that in some parts of the world you have very big growth, very big changes, and in other parts of the world it's a very different situation where we're struggling with other pressures on finances and so on. And of course the politicians who are here this week are going to be talking about exactly that. But let me concentrate for a very brief time that we have on my company, Mars, and what we've done to try and address some of the problems and the challenges that we talked about, that we're talking about today. So, let me just see if I can get this to... Can we get that to work? Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let me just give you a few facts, because some of you may not know Mars, although we've got quite large business here in Brazil, but we are actually still 100% privately owned family business. We have sales of about $30 billion, so we're a large company. About 70,000 people work for us. And not only do we think we make good chocolate, but we also have a large pet care business. We have a chewing gum business in Wrigley. We make some human foods, Uncle Ben's converted rice, which you may know here in Brazil. And we have a drinks business as well, which is office coffee that produces coffee and tea, hot drinks for the office workplace. And so here are some of the brands that we've got. Oh, let me go. Get it right. It's jumping. Yes, they don't want to do it. So there's some of the brands that we've got, and many of those we make here in Brazil. Our pet care brands, Whiskas, Pedigree, Royal Canin, etc. So the point of saying all that really is just to say that we are quite a large business. We're not the only large business by many accounts. But the point I'd like to try and make is that when you look at the impacts that we have as a business across our total supply chain, and you use the great work that our friends from WRI have developed, and say, for example, use the greenhouse gas protocol to calculate the total impacts of our business from raw materials right through to finished products, it is significant. And it's the size of a small to medium-sized country. And that is because we produce a lot of things. We produce about 8 million tons of product a year. And so that has some impact. So the point is, how do you continue to create and grow that business, but do it in a way which reduces those impacts? And that's what I'm going to talk about. It helps, in our case, that we're a private business, because we've got some fundamental principles, and those 5 at the bottom, of which probably in the way in which we're talking to get today, mutuality is the most important. Mutuality was actually started by one of our founders nearly 70 years ago. It had a very different meaning then than today, but in the concept of it, what it means is, if you want to have a successful business, you need to do business in a way which everybody who touches you, the people that work for you, the people that you buy raw materials from, the people that you sell products to, can actually benefit from your business, not only financially, but in the sense, as we're talking about today, from an environmental point of view and a people point of view. So that helps. It doesn't take us off the hook, though. It gives us a bit more freedom to make investments on a longer term time scale, but it still means that those investments have got to be sensible. No? Try. Okay. So one of the things, if you look at that supply chain, you'll see an interesting aspect. So here we have a typical supply chain that would, in this case, look like many food businesses. You start with raw materials, you do some processing, you then bring them inside your own 4 walls to make the finished products that hopefully people will like. You then ship them somewhere to a supermarket, and eventually they go to a consumer. The point about this is if you look at the impacts generally, whether it's climate change or water or the use of land, the impacts are actually most significant at either end of the supply chain, which is, interestingly, the part of the supply chain that we control the least. The bit that we control the most, which is the red line, is actually the bit in the middle. And in the sense of carbon, for example, in our case, it's 20% of the total. So it's not insignificant, but it's not the largest part. So when you're working out how to reduce those large greenhouse gas impacts that we're talking about while still making the business successful, you've got to figure out how to do it in a very different way from in the middle from where you are at either end. So let me just talk about what we're doing. We started in the middle because that's the bit that we know the best. We call it our operations, and we've developed this approach. We've called it sustainable in a generation. We've defined a generation as 2040, so it's a little bit earlier than the 2050 that you've been hearing about. And our objective is to take 4 areas, energy, carbon, water and waste, and make significant differences starting in 2007, which is when we had the most data, going right through to 2040. Take energy and carbon. Our goal is that by 2040, all our operations will be fossil fuel free, will be 100% renewable energy, in other words. So we'll be using the kind of equipment that our friend from Siemens was talking about a few minutes ago, and not using any fuel from a fossil fuel source. Now that's a pretty challenging thing to do, because we can't rely on the electricity grid or the power grid to do that. So we're actually having to create those projects for ourselves that will allow us to do that. So in the meantime, we're saying we're not going to wait till 2040, so we've set a target of 25% reduction by 2015, which means that we've got to get on with it now. Similarly, we've set reductions in water and waste, using less water, creating less waste, coming out of landfill by 100% by 2015, and figuring out a long-term impact while the world of metrics looks at water, for example, and says, water is not quite the same all over the world. How do we figure out a stress-based measure of water that reflects different climates, different usage patterns, and then actually we will be setting a very tough target, I think, that commits us to similar reductions in water. So that's what we've done, and you can see a little diagram on the right that says we've started slow on renewable energy because we want to concentrate on efficiency at the moment, use less. And then when you're using as little as possible, you're as efficient as possible, you then switch to renewable energy. And that's kind of the approach over the 30 years. So let's talk quickly about raw materials. It's slightly different because there are other people involved. We can't fix this all ourselves. So we've got 3 approaches. One of them here, you can see some of the key raw materials that we use, is to engage with partners on certification. Certification is a way of basically assuring that all those raw materials are grown and produced and shipped sustainably from sustainable sources, and that the people involved in producing those materials get a better deal out of that. But that's not the only thing. The other thing that we can contribute is that we've got a lot of investment in science. And a good example of that is that we've actually produced, along with IBM, the cocoa genome. And we've published it generally. And the idea to do that is to speed up the breeding process so that better planting materials, in the case of cocoa, can be selected from, instead of 7 years, it can now take 18 months, and you can go through cycling the improvement in planting material much faster. And that allows us to give the farmers better feedstock to start with. Then, of course, it's about practices in the field, making sure that people are trained and can operate their farms as efficiently as possible. And then, of course, we've got the certification partnership as well. And so I think, to finish with, I would say that these challenges are really here with us today. It's a long-term journey, the kind of journey that we're keen to engage in. We think it's going to be pretty tough, but we're absolutely convinced. The premise of today's event is that you can have a successful business and have a sustainable business as well. And from our perspective, there is no doubt about that at all. It doesn't mean it's easy, it means it's entirely possible. And actually, creating that mindset in the business has given us all the 70,000 people that work for Mars, a much more interesting life and an exciting life, because people want to feel that they can work for a business that operates in that way. So thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to joining the panel later.
Thanks so much. Very interesting. Robert, over to PepsiCo. Robert has worked and had a distinguished career at PepsiCo, leading their global public policy work on sustainability and also on climate and energy, I see. So, floor is yours.
Boa tarde. Obrigado for having me here. I'm sorry my Portuguese is no better, so I'll have to do this in English. So I'm here to also talk about PepsiCo and what PepsiCo is and why we care about sustainability. So just to give some background on PepsiCo, we're a $66 billion a year company. We have $22 billion brands globally. You're familiar with some of our products, of course, Pepsi. But we also have our Frito-Lay products, Elma chips here in Brazil. We have our Melba crackers and cookies in Brazil as well. Quaker is ours, Gatorade. And I would encourage you all to enjoy them as much as possible. And so one of the things that we have learned with having a $66 billion a year company and $22 billion brands is that our consumers and customers care about sustainability. It's something that they want to know that PepsiCo is working on, and we want to be able to show that we're doing good business by doing sustainable business practices. And we have developed what we call our Performance with Purpose, or the promise of PepsiCo, where we have formally recognized that our performance, the financial health of our business, goes hand in hand with our purpose, the sustainability practices that we're implementing around the world. And today I want to go through some of those practices and demonstrate how we're taking really the new way of doing business, not just from a pilot perspective, but the implementation, so that we can reach into our complete supply chain and make those changes across our entire operations. I think, as Andrew very astutely put it, is that the impacts that our companies have is very small when you compare it to the aggregate of our complete supply chain. And so with that, we'll have a few examples. What you see here are certainly the logos from a project that we did in Mexico, where we were transitioning subsistence corn farmers into a sunflower oil crop. This project was a partnership between the Mexican government, the Interdevelopment Bank, and Agrofinance. And the basic concept was that PepsiCo is looking to transition from an oil that has trans fats in it, it's palm oil, to a hyolytic sunflower oil, so it's trans fat free. That transition in the oil requires that we have to have the supply chain. The cost of importing sunflower oil into Mexico is cost prohibitive when you compare it to the palm oil. So we have started a pilot project where we are transitioning farmers from subsistence corn, where they're able to stay with their families the entire year. They don't have to illegally immigrate into other countries. So now they can plant a sunflower oil crop and stay with their families. And what we've been able to see through this project is that we're able to not only save water and energy and fuel at the farm level, but it directly benefits PepsiCo. So we're able to reduce our overall cost of oil. We're able to transition our products into a hyolytic sunflower oil that doesn't have the trans fats in it. And we're able to ensure that we have a secure supply chain. And if you look at some of the results, you'll see that while we've only planted 1,000 hectares, our goal by 2018 is to plant 10,000 hectares. The interesting part here, and some of the learnings that we found, is that we need to be prepared for the environment. So you see we planted 1,000 hectares. We only harvested a little over 550. It was because there was a drought in Mexico. And some of the learnings that we had is being able to go in and work directly with the farmers to provide the education for them, to provide the direct agrochemicals, to provide drip irrigation, and the training was critical to ensuring that we had a successful crop. But despite the fact that we had crop failure and other challenges, we still have stayed true to our commitment of $52 million over the course of 7 years to fully develop this project out, to bring about 660 farmers that are subsistence farmers now into the hyolytic sunflower oil crop. And we're well on our way to doing that. As you can see, just in year one for the pilot project alone, we've been able to see a cost reduction of about 5% in our oil. Which then shifts us into another project that we've done in Africa, and it's our Ethiopia chickpea project. Now, this is an interesting project because we've been looking at how do we ensure that the products that we make locally are applicable to the local populations. In Ethiopia, we could go in and we could offer our corn chips or our potato chips, but we decided to take a different step and to work with a product, a commodity that's already well in place in Ethiopia around chickpeas. And the wonderful thing about this is we aren't bringing in new technology. We aren't making huge shifts in how the farmers do business. What we're actually doing is leveraging existing technology and practices that are in place in Ethiopia and helping them to expand them and to move them into a broader marketplace. This is a partnership with the USAID and the Ethiopian government, and the initial gist of the project is to provide basic nutrition to the base of the pyramid. Which when we're talking about the next business practices, when you're looking at what does it look like to do business when you have a world of 9 billion people, as Minash was saying, and how do you transition what you're doing on a global scale? It's about local products. It's about making them locally relevant, utilizing existing practices so you have the ownership by the local farmers and the local businesses. But then being able to scale that up across a broader business. How do you take this project and not only have chickpeas that you're able to provide to the base of the pyramid for basic nutrition, but turn it into a local product so that they're able to buy this and use it from a Pepsico standpoint? And really, taking this concept, we've been able to develop a project and a specific product in India. This product is what we call, as you can see, iron chusti. And iron chusti delivers 20% of the basic iron needs into a population that is desperately needing basic nutrition. What we had found in the Andhra Pradesh province is that we have an adolescent girl population that was lacking in iron. I have 2 little girls at home. When I try to get them to eat their spinach so they will get their iron, they look at me like I'm crazy. So if we had developed a product that it was spinach in a bag, we probably would also see the same results in India. But if we're able to take a product and make it fun and good for them, and yet also deliver the nutrition that they need, then we're actually able to make changes at the base of the pyramid. The product is also extremely affordable. It's only about 2 rupees, which translates to about 5 or 6 US pennies. So it's accessible nutrition. So it's about changing our business so that we're implementing local practices so we can reach the base of the pyramid. The great thing about this, of course, is that it comes with communication. So being able to inform people, let them know that these products are available for them, that they can use this in their everyday lifestyles, that they're able to make changes in their lives using Pepsico products. And these are just 3 examples that we've put in place that I wanted to share with you today so that you could see some of the things that we've done around the promise of PepsiCo and really integrating and shifting the business so that we're able to implement sustainability. Again, so our performance, the profits of the business, go hand in hand with our purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Be thinking about your questions. I'm going to get us going here, but this is the opportunity for you all to come in. I mean, one question that comes through my mind is, I mean, Andrew, you said you're doing this. It's not easy. It's challenging. And one question in my mind is, what is needed in order to make it easier for you? I mean, is it something that you've within the policy sphere? Is it in the financing sphere? Is it in the local situation? What is needed for you to meet your targets more easily and affordably? For Siemens to go even greener? For Pepsico to create even more of these products? And Peter, I ask this to you as well because you're looking at companies. What do you need to do more? Andrew, why don't you start?
This sounds like a set-up question, but I know it isn't because we've not heard this before. But because the answer I'm going to give is actually one of the most significant things for us is to create measurement systems for environmental and social factors that are as clear and as agreed and as well articulated as financial measures for businesses. So the work that WRI has done, for example, in creating the greenhouse gas protocol has taken all the debate out of measuring carbon footprint. Everybody can now measure carbon footprint. So for me, the answer is find measures in these areas that stop people having conversations about the measures, and then you can have conversations about how to reduce the impact. And so the quicker we can get the world agreed on a measure of water stress, for example, which is the next one, I would suggest, because water is almost as equal, if not as important as carbon, then I think we'll be in a much better position. It'll speed up the whole action then.
I think just to build on that, certainly measurements are absolutely critical, and very much appreciate the fact that the World Resource Institute has worked with the World Business Council to develop the greenhouse gas protocol. But one of the important things as well is funding. And funding of these projects and these types of initiatives can really only come through public-private partnerships. When you're looking at making huge shifts in your businesses to open up to base of the pyramid markets, to be able to go in and introduce a chickpea product or to shift into a sunflower, it can only be done with the local governments. In addition to that, cross-sectoral business relationships. So working with Siemens and leveraging their technology within Pepsico platforms in our operations. Working with companies like Mars in food initiatives and our businesses coming together and joining collaboratives. If we're not able to work together collectively and bring these things together, we simply won't have the changes that are needed in the time that we need them to be made.
I think we need to see more companies experimenting more bravely, and I still think that for genuinely sustainable new business models, there aren't very many out there from companies. Genuinely closed-loop production, people moving from selling products to services, people doing radical dematerialization. There's a few examples, but not enough. And I think companies, we know the scale of what we need to do. Companies need to be braver, take some bigger risks, find some things that work, and then scale them up. And I think companies are a lot of feeling it very difficult to take risks at the moment. So I think we won't get there without a kind of a sense of experimentation. And you're the kind of guys that are going to do it, I think.
Yeah, I fully do agree to this, because in the times right now, if you're talking to a C-level guy of a company, a CEO, and to tell them, well, you have to take some more risks to be successful, well, that's not a good start for a talk to him. So what we would need, what we would appreciate to have are some methodologies, some possibilities to work as a catalysator, to enable the business also to take more risks, to enable the business to support it, to bring in some new ideas. And you're fully right when you're claiming, well, there's no big new ideas around. Well, not established. I think there are ideas around, no doubt about. New ideas, circular economy, there's an initiative, resource productivity, reflections. Well, this is good stuff. But what is needed, obviously, is a kind of a push, a first momentum to get things started. And if there's a public-private partnership needed or some other instruments, well, this I would like to leave open. There are many ways to roam, yeah? But definitely we would need support. I think we are working together in an agreement. We are working together with you. That's helpful. But a support and some patience and some let's say, momentum, this is what's needed. It can be done via regulations or other instruments as well.
That was going to be my question. So I think we should tell the politicians to go home. I mean, what are they doing here in Rio? You guys, it's very interesting for me to hear you're talking about the public-private side of things, the interlinking things, the kind of experimentation. Role of government? Role of necessary?
Yes. Well, you can only go so far with voluntary initiatives, but in the end, we need to price natural resources and externalities correctly if they're going to be valued in the economy and in these guys' business models. And I think only governments can price natural resources and externalities and integrate that into the economy in a way that it makes sense to do the sustainable thing.
So thank you for jumping in the question if governments are necessary. So to say yes, this was good. Definitely, governments absolutely are important. Governments can support, and governments also can lead us and can help us to develop these new ideas. What is needed is a very close cooperation, very close communication with the governments. It's a day-to-day job what we have to do. And again, be patient. Yeah, it's difficult for us also. We would like to do even more. We have the possibility to do more. Technology can really solve many of the problems. Yeah, there are good examples to this, but what we do need is patience, patience, and patience. So don't be too quick.
Yes, please, in the back, if you could.
Hi, my name is Carolina. In this question of what you can do more, I would like to ask you, it's clear that from what you presented, you have been raising your bar, and congratulations to that. But it seems from the discussions we're seeing around sustainable development that maybe very soon you will be asked to raise your bar to the question of consumption, of sustainable consumption. That has been a topic that even achieved the World Economic Forum this year, or just simply reducing consumption, not only on the environmental sector, but also in the health sector, as obesity is becoming a big problem of our century. So I'd like you to comment to which extent you're ready to raise your bar to that.
Sure. Very much appreciate you bringing that up. Actually, Pepsico has been working on this sustainable consumption issue for some time. We actually just released a vision document through the World Business Council for Sustainable Development on sustainable consumption with Hinkle and Nokia as co-chairs. It's something that we'll be talking about in several different sessions here through the Rio Plus 20. But I think the interesting part around sustainability, and when you look at sustainable consumption in particular, it's about companies ensuring that you have the innovation, the choice editing, and the choice influencing baked into your products, so that most of the consumers around the world have told us many, many times that they care about sustainability, that they want to know that a company is doing what's right, and then they show up at the store and they buy whatever they want to buy anyways. So by and large, customers want sustainability by stealth. They want to know that the corporations have made the changes in their own operations, they've made changes in their overall supply chain, so that the inherent products that they want to pull off the shelf have it already worked into it. And so the sustainable consumption model that we've worked out through the vision document is one that recognizes this fact, so that you're able to help meet people's aspirations. I think as our speakers talked about aspirations and trying to increase your consumption patterns, and what do these look like, if companies have made these changes within their products and their supply chain, then that consumption is enabled in a sustainable way.
Yeah, let me just add, because I think obviously we're in a similar position, and we recognise absolutely the points you've made, and we want to try and find a way of people who've enjoyed our products for 70 years continuing to do that, but in a responsible way. So we've for example, I think you called it choice editing, we've banned all advertising to anybody under 13 years old, so that's one good thing. We've made portion control on our products at a level where it's a reasonable part of everybody's enjoyable intake in a day. So clearly we don't want people to be over-consuming our products. We want people to be enjoying them, and that requires a two-way partnership. But the thing is also true is that we're trying very hard to educate consumers, and we still see this trend. It's moving. Consumers definitely are moving, but there's a big difference between what people say they will buy and then when they get in the store, what they actually will buy. So what we're trying to do is influence that. And I think that's going to take slightly longer, but we're absolutely determined to play our part, because the last thing we want is to have anybody, rounding on us as being a big problem. We want to be part of the solution and allow people to carry on enjoying our products.
Hi, good afternoon. Ruben Dobon from the Inter-American Development Bank. Thanks, Robert, for showcasing a collaboration of ours. Also, I work for a multilateral investment fund within there, and thanks for pointing out the funding and also taking risks for innovative business models. It's exactly what we're here for, so let's roll it all into one. On to the question. I was particularly interested in hearing you speak, all of you, a little bit about the uptake into sustainable business practices of smaller businesses. Here you have big anchor firms, and of course you talked about your supply chains, but how has that actually worked out with the uptake within the smaller businesses in your supply chains? Has there been a shakeout? Are anchor firms the biggest incentives for the supply chains or for the small businesses to change their practices, or are there other incentives out there? I mean, I think it's particularly important considering in the developing world the large percent of employment drive and economic drive that small businesses take part.
That's a great question, and I think as Andrew had pointed out when he was talking about the life cycle analysis of our products and how the businesses are really taking that holistic look, it really does involve, if you will, the small businesses that are part of that life cycle. In Pepsico, we've been doing this by direct contracts with the farmers that are in our supply chain. In India, as an example, we have over 24,000 direct contracts with the farmers where we're helping them reduce their agrochemical, water, and energy usage. We're working with our co-manufacturers and our suppliers where we're literally going to their doors and training them on how to use less water and energy in their manufacturing process. I think the way we like to think of it is that we may be more sustainable by 2015 and 2020 and on and in the continuing journey. But if PepsiCo is moving along by ourselves without bringing our supply chain along with us, are we really sustainable? And also working in partnerships like the Corporate Consultative Group with the World Resource Institute, the Sustainability Consortium, and the Consumer Goods Forum, where you have cross-collaboration across sectors and with similar companies, is absolutely critical to bring that entire supply chain and the small businesses along with you.
Even though Siemens, for example, is doing quite a different business than you guys are doing, so it's no sweets, and the more the customers are buying our products, the less they are going to consume in terms of, for example, energy. But it's our own interest to make our supply chain also strong, because the stronger and the better our supply chain is, the more successful we are in the business. So it's our interest to get them involved in all the programs, for example, the energy efficiency program. Yeah, we are working together with them to make them more resource productive, with clearly the target also to reduce the cost for us at the end of the day. And this is, I think, also a very nice and a new philosophy that we are taking into consideration.
I would only add one thing. I think the principles of what we're talking about today apply equally to a small business as to a large business. I think our responsibility, because A, our impacts are bigger, and B, we influence the supply chain, hopefully in a positive way, means that we can actually have a bigger impact or bigger dynamic in the way in which we change. But in terms of the issues, the way in which things get measured, then I think it's exactly the same for a small business as for a larger one.
Yeah, I would just say that there's some businesses, I won't name them, who just pass this straight down the supply chain and expect the least able small businesses to comply and change. The best businesses have supplier forums, they have money available in loans, they have technical support, and they actually strengthen the ability of their supply chain to be low carbon and successful in the future. And I think we should be asking those questions of businesses, and there should be no excuse for them to be just handing the carbon reduction problem down their supply chain. I'm not saying any of you three are doing it. I think you three have some very strong examples of doing it in different ways.
Yes.
I'm Dagmar Diemer of the German Tagesspiegel, a daily newspaper in Berlin. That sounds all very nice, but then there's the practice of businesses, especially when they are in their business cycles, who somehow seem to not be able to embrace the new style, for example, of Siemens. We had in Germany a ridiculous debate about do we need an energy efficiency directive from the EU, and are we able to use less energy? And in fact, I did not hear anything from Siemens in that debate, but I heard a lot of your of the Verbände, I don't know the English word for it, who tried to hinder to get anything like that done. So I really wonder why is it these two phases? Why is it that every time when it is tried to scale up the effort, not only for some pioneers like you, but for all the others too, why is it that then the resistance is so big that it is almost impossible to do it?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Actually, I was personally in charge in developing the energy efficiency program within Siemens some 12 years ago. So it was after the Protocol of Kyoto with the idea to reduce CO2 emissions by in introducing an energy efficiency project also in the industry. And what you said is right and not right. Right in terms of it's very slow. It's a very slow progress. I personally was quite frustrated because there were wonderful business models, wonderful ideas, return on investment, very quickly, payback periods less than 1 year, less than 2 years, so even for industry really interesting. It was just not happening. I think one problem was certainly the time. There was many companies investing into new production facilities than in improving the old existing facilities. This was one problem. So the money was there, but they did decide to dedicate the money for other purposes, what I can fully understand. Right now we are coming into another phase. And right now, the energy efficiency program is really gaining speed and momentum. So this was our experience. We shared this also with the World Resource Institute. This is right now a very interesting business model. And if I'm just looking at the ramp-up of the energy consultants we do have within Siemens, also here in Brazil, it was kind of 2 or 3 dozens of people, and right now it's more than 200. So it's gaining momentum. It's proving that it's working, and I think this is the best possibility and best way to convince external parties, to convince them, to show them, to prove to them, well, this is the right way, and it's really worth it. Trying to influence the politicians or the EU or somebody else, well, that's a long story. Yeah? We are more, let's say, on the practical side. We are doing this not only internally, but certainly also external with the supply chain, as I mentioned, and we are selling this also to customers. Right now, I can assure you it's really speeding up.
But I think it's a valuable point. I used to work in the British government. I would have people from the same company coming in and lobbying against the kind of higher environmental standards that somebody else in that same company was asking for. So whenever we see that, we should make it open and talk about it. The second problem is that often the lobbying is done by industry associations, and industry associations have a long tail sometimes that wags the dog, if that makes sense. So you have some very progressive people, but the industry association speaks on behalf of everybody, and somehow the least progressive, we call it lowest common denominator voice, comes through. So that can be negative, but it's starting to change. You have Corporate Leaders Group on climate change calling for higher standards. And I look at a company like Unilever, and I saw their public affairs people go through a realization that to make that strategy work, Instead of going around and lobbying against high environmental standards everywhere, they need to do the opposite. They need to go and lobby for high environmental standards because they will be the company best able to meet those high environmental standards. It will put them in a stronger competitive position. So, I think we'll increasingly see companies becoming proactive lobbyists for this rather than lobbying against.
Well, we've actually run out of time, but I think this is a great point to close on. I mean, thank you very much for not only being here, but for being the motors and the pushers, both inside your companies. I think we see the next practice needs, not only in experimentation, in measurement, bringing transparency, and also in engaging in the policy space as well, and how that happens to accelerate the pace towards sustainable development. So thank you very much. Please give our panelists a hand. And please do stick around. We're moving in. We'll take a very quick break, and then we're moving into our second panel on the Open Climate Network, looking at solar in a number of countries and how to move ahead and the benefits there. So thanks.